I'm taking everything, my husband whispered across the defense table, flashing that arrogant smirk that used to make my heart flutter. Now, it just made my stomach turn. For 3 agonizing hours, his hotshot attorney had systematically dismantled my life, painting me as a penniless, gold-digging mistake while Daniel sat back, polished, untouchable, and victorious. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully stripped me of our home, my dignity, and every cent I'd helped him earn over 6 years. The judge raised her hand to render the final decree, ready to seal my fate and leave me with nothing. But then she paused. She put on her reading glasses, flipped to a page at the very back of the financial disclosures, and looked directly at Daniel. Her voice echoed through the silent courtroom. Mr. Carter, before I sign this, can you explain account ending in 8802? My name is Clara Vance. I'm 27 years old, and up until a few months ago, I truly believed I was living a fairy tale. When I met Daniel 6 years ago, he was a struggling tech consultant with big dreams and an empty bank account. I believed in him when nobody else did. I worked 2 jobs to pay our rent, cooked every meal, and even put my own marketing career on hold so he could focus entirely on building his business. And it worked. Within a few years, Daniel's company exploded. Suddenly, we were living in a high-rise apartment, attending lavish dinners, and driving luxury cars. I thought we were a team, but success changed Daniel. The warmth that once filled his eyes turned into a cold, transactional glare. He started staying out late, claiming it was client dinners. He flipped his phone face down whenever I entered the room. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he'd roll his eyes and tell me I was being paranoid. Then came the Tuesday that shattered my world. I came home to find a man in a dark suit standing on my porch. He handed me an envelope and said, "You've been served." Daniel had filed for divorce. Panicked, I tried to log into our joint checking account to retain a lawyer, only to see a balance of $0. Daniel hadn't just left me. He had completely erased me overnight. When I confronted Daniel that evening, expecting a shred of remorse, he didn't even look up from his laptop. His money, he told me with ice in his voice, was his money. He claimed I had done nothing over the last 6 years except live off his hard work. "You were just along for the ride, Clara," he spat, his tone condescending and razor-sharp. "You didn't build this life. I did." Within 48 hours, Daniel hired Arthur Vance, the city's most ruthless, high-priced divorce attorney. They didn't just want a clean break. They wanted to annihilate me. They froze my credit cards, changed the locks on our high-rise apartment, and gave me 3 days to pack my clothes in garbage bags. Desperate and terrified, I used the small savings my sister loaned me to hire a modest, budget-friendly legal advisor named Sarah. Compared to Daniel's army of lawyers, Sarah was operating out of a tiny, cramped office, but she possessed a fierce sense of justice. Still, the psychological toll was suffocating. I was 27, evicted from my own home, completely isolated from our mutual friends who suddenly took Daniel's side and portrayed in legal filings as a lazy, entitled leech. I spent my nights on my sister's couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the man who once promised to protect me had become the villain destroying my life. But beneath the overwhelming panic, a tiny ember of anger was beginning to burn. That burning anger was exactly what kept me moving forward. 2 weeks before our trial date, I was sitting on the floor of my sister's spare room, sifting through the few boxes I'd managed to pack from the apartment. Deep at the bottom of a dusty crate filled with my old college textbooks, my fingers brushed against something hard and metallic. It was an old, encrypted USB drive I'd used years ago when I managed the bookkeeping for Daniel's very first consulting gig. My heart hammered against my ribs as I plugged it into my laptop. On it were archived tax filings, early invoices, and old email threads from the days when Daniel still trusted me with his passwords. As I dug deeper into the spreadsheets, something felt off. 6 years ago, when Daniel was supposedly broke, a minor subsidiary company called Apex Dynamics had been registered under his name. I took the drive straight to Sarah's office. For 3 straight days, fueled by stale coffee and sheer determination, we cross-referenced those old tax filings with Daniel's current financial disclosures. Daniel's arrogance had made him sloppy. He assumed I was too heartbroken to look closely, but Sarah's sharp eyes caught it. Every single month for the past 4 years, a precise sum of money had been quietly routed from his main corporate account into an unlisted subsidiary before vanishing into thin air. It wasn't just a minor oversight. It was a systematic, calculated drip of hidden funds. Daniel thought he was an unstoppable genius who had successfully covered his tracks, but he had completely forgotten that I was the one who helped him lay the foundation. We didn't have all the answers yet, but we finally had the thread that could unravel his entire lie. The morning of the court hearing, the sky outside was heavy and gray. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat at the defense table in a bespoke charcoal suit, looking like he owned the entire building. Beside him, his high-priced attorney, Arthur, adjusted his cufflinks with the smooth confidence of a man who had never lost a high-stakes divorce case. When I walked in with Sarah, Daniel didn't even bother to hide his amusement. As I took my seat across from him, he leaned over the mahogany divider, lowered his voice, and flashed that infuriating, arrogant smirk. "I'm taking everything, Clara," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. "You should have taken whatever small settlement I offered. Now you leave with 0. I forced myself to stare straight ahead, my hands tightly clasped beneath the table to hide their trembling. For the next 2 hours, Arthur put on a masterclass in character assassination. He presented glossy charts and bank summaries, painting Daniel as the sole visionary of his tech empire while portraying me as a financial burden who contributed nothing of value to our 6-year marriage. He argued that every asset belonged strictly to Daniel and that I didn't deserve a single dime of spousal support. Daniel sat there basking in the performance, occasionally nodding with quiet, performance-level humility. To anyone watching, it looked like a total slaughter. But as Arthur wrapped up his impassioned closing argument, claiming Daniel had provided a completely transparent accounting of his wealth, I glanced at Sarah. She gave my hand a subtle, firm squeeze. We were sitting on a ticking time bomb, and Daniel had no idea the fuse was already lit. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating as the judge, a formidable woman named Honorable Brenda Vance, adjusted her glasses and began reviewing the asset division summary. Daniel leaned back in his leather chair, practically vibrating with triumphant energy. He was ready for the gavel to strike, ready to watch me walk out with nothing. "Your Honor," Sarah's voice rang out, breaking the heavy silence. "Before you render the final decree, the defense requests permission to submit a supplementary exhibit. It contains a certified forensic audit completed late last night." Arthur scoffed, standing up immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a desperate, last-minute delay tactic. My client's financial disclosures are complete, audited, and fully transparent." Overruled. Judge Vance stated sternly, "I will review any verified documentation before making a final ruling." Sarah walked forward and handed a single blue folder to the clerk. For 2 excruciating minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft rustle of paper as the judge flipped through the forensic trail we had pieced together, following the breadcrumbs from the old USB drive straight to an unlisted offshore trust. Suddenly, Judge Vance stopped turning the pages. Her face hardened into stone. She slowly removed her reading glasses, leaned over her bench, and locked her piercing gaze directly onto my husband. The confident atmosphere in the room completely vanished in an instant. "Mr. Carter." The judge's voice echoed off the wood-paneled walls, cold enough to freeze the air. "I am looking at sworn financial disclosures where you declared under penalty of perjury that you held no additional liquid assets. So, before I sign this decree, can you explain account ending in 8802? Daniel's smug expression instantly disintegrated. His lawyer stammered, frantically grabbing at his own paperwork, while Daniel stared blankly at the judge, his face completely drained of color. "Account ending in 8802? Arthur stammers, his voice dropping an octave as he frantically flips through his pristine binders. "Your Honor, my client, there must be a clerical error." "This is no clerical error, Mr. Vance." Judge Vance cuts in, her gavel striking the bench with a deafening crack. "This is an offshore high-yield account in the Cayman Islands containing $4.2 million. rerouted systematically over 4 years from Apex Dynamics. An account Mr. Carter conveniently omitted under penalty of perjury. Daniel's mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The man who had spent months executing a brilliant, calculated plot to ruin me is now sweating through his custom suit. Across the gallery, hushed whispers erupt. You sat in my courtroom. Judge Vance continues, her eyes burning into Daniel, and allowed your counsel to argue that your wife was a penniless mistake while actively hiding millions that were built during the span of your marriage. Because Daniel committed blatant fraud and perjury, the legal backlash is swift and absolute. The judge doesn't just reject his settlement terms, she completely rewrites the decree. I am awarded 70% of the hidden offshore account, full ownership of our primary high-rise apartment, and substantial spousal support to cover my legal fees. Daniel sits frozen in horror, watching his fortune, his reputation, and his victory disintegrate in real time. The ultimate strategist had been brought down by the very woman he thought was too weak to fight back. Walking out of that courthouse into the cool afternoon air, I took my first real breath in 6 months. The weight that had been crushing my chest was finally gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom. Daniel had tried to strip away my dignity and leave me with nothing, but in his arrogance, he forgot that I helped build the foundation he stood on. With my share of the settlement, I didn't spend it on luxury or revenge. I moved into a sunlit apartment, bought back my independence, and relaunched my own marketing firm. At 27, my life isn't over. It's just getting started, completely on my own terms. If you were in my shoes, would you have pushed to expose the hidden account, or walked away just to end the nightmare? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories.